Welcome to the Homeschool Mom Chat. Today we get to talk about reigniting your homeschool mom spark, and specifically speaking with Rachel Marie Martin. She is an author of a few books. This year she authored Get Your Spark Back. Apropos to the present emotional season of many, I know just across various professional spectrums, people are feeling burned out. And I know the homeschool moms experience that in this season, it's classic to feel burned out. If we haven't met, I'm Teresa Wiedrich, the certified life coach and homeschool graduate, the homeschool graduate of four moms or four kids, and over the last 2 decades. So I'm graduated. It means I'm no longer homeschooling, but I've moved into the life coaching space in 2019, and I'm here to help you shed what's not working so you can enjoy your homeschool mom life more. So without further ado, I'd love to invite, she's here. I would love to invite Rachel to have a conversation with me. Hey, Rachel.
It
Wow, we both
connected.
chose green. How wild is that?
It's good. It's maybe because it's cold.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
actually ordered a matcha latte today at Starbucks, and I said, I know it tastes like grass, but I just want to be warm.
Does it make you feel warm? That's it.
I think it just reminds me of spring because it does taste kind of earthy.
It does.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I'm with you. Well, I don't have matcha, but I do have my on brand. Yeah. So lovely to see you again.
You too. You too. I'm not sure. I can't remember where you are, but I'm guessing it's cold because of your video that where you said, I wish it was warm.
Yeah, only in the last about a week ago did it get below -5 Celsius, but we're on the west coast of Canada. So
Okay, that's right.
yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
Okay.
cold enough
Okay.
to wear a sweater. But to
Well, it's
everybody that
cold.
I haven't met, I just want to say thanks for joining me. I'm a homeschool mom turned certified life coach, and I'm here to help homeschool moms shed what's not working. And I don't know if you know this, Rachel, but this is the season of, sometimes people call it slump month or
Hmm.
winter blues. Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's a definite season for a homeschool mom life.
It is. So I'm not sure how much we shared about this part, but I was a homeschool mom for many years in Minnesota.
Awesome.
And it's not quite the west coast of Canada, but definitely this season through March was always, it was the winter blues was
Yeah.
what it was. And yeah, just because going outside was, it just wasn't, everything was is more complicated too.
Yeah. Especially with kids. Yeah. No,
Yes.
actually, here off in Minnesota, it's sometimes colder than where I am. So I think you definitely know it.
It's cold. I can tell you that whenever we'd hear the words Arctic Clipper coming, because it would come from Alberta, we
Alberta.
knew
Yes.
we were gonna be inside for
Yeah.
a while.
I grew up in Alberta, so I entirely
Yeah.
relate. Yeah, we were told you have to go outside during recess, even if you're, or until your nostrils were frozen together. And that's not a joke. I really was told that.
Yeah, I can remember that as well. I mean, now I live in Tennessee and everyone's like, it's so cold. I'm like, it's cold, but it's also 12.
Yeah, that is a summer in Alberta.
Right, right. Well, 12 Fahrenheit. So
Right.
yeah, but probably still, yes.
So, you've had so much going on over the last, I'm guessing, 6 months, chatting with all different kind of people about your book and the relevance of your book to everyone, not just homeschool parents, but everyone. What have you learned about, after we write a book, we often learn things about our book and how it's resonating?
Hmm. The biggest thing I've learned is that get your spark back. It's kind of it's a lifestyle. It's really definitely it's not just a one and done thing. It's you go through these seasons and these waves, whether it's an emotional wave or a life wave.
Yeah.
About sometimes you're like, I am that girl on fire, where you feel like you're on top of the world, and then there's other times, just like we were talking in the beginning with the kind of winter blues, where you're in that kind of slump. And what I've learned is that when you're in that slump, the really brave thing is to go, you know what, is to recognize that's where it is, and to know the history that you get out, that you can move forward. And that's been really, it's kind of been enlightening for myself.
And so what have you learned over the last few months about that?
Well, considering even for my own self, because I was on this huge media tour and busy, 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 and then all of a sudden it just kind of slowed down. And I've learned that there takes a lot of resilience to say, I need to pause, I need to recalibrate, I need to let go of what I don't need to do anymore, and I need to really step into the spaces that I'm called. And sometimes that looks different than what we think we're supposed to be doing. And, for myself, as a content creator and a writer and entrepreneur, just even this last couple of days, I realized, you know what? I love writing. I love speaking. I love this, but I don't like creating like courses and all of that. And it was such an insight where I thought, wait a second, as an entrepreneur, am I not supposed to be doing that? And then I realized, no, no, no. I'm just thinking that's the box that follows with me. I can delegate, I can give it out. And that's kind of been the lesson I've learned.
That brings up a few thoughts for me. I know we had a really significant conversation around, bringing your spark back, getting your spark
Mm-hmm.
back. What I understand, and also part of our conversation, that we get clear on who we are. When we do that, then we get clear on what we want to do, our next
Mm-hmm.
step, our purposeful next step. And you talked about creating space that was linear, or actually putting space or time into our calendar that it looks like it's a linear activity, but then you're actually creating space to get creative, open up and be creative.
Yeah, that actually, I'm so glad you brought that up because that honestly has been one of the lessons I've learned post the media blitz of Get Your Spark Back is that my creative soul, I have the two parts, the creative and the linear, and the linear part of me is very aware of time moving. Like, what do you got to do next? What do you have to do next? But my creative part, the part that writes, that taps into that human experience, can't function as well in that linear context because it's the pressure, create, create, create.
Yeah.
And so what I've done is that linear chunking of time. Okay, for 2 hours, you are going to block out these 2 hours and you're going to use it. You are free to do whatever you want to do creatively. And so it satisfies the linear
Yeah.
part that knows in 2 hours the buzzer is going to go off, and the creative part that knows I have this space to
Yeah.
roam
Yeah.
without the pressure of time.
Time blocking. Would you just
Yes.
like that? That was revolutionary for me.
Yeah, it's kind of it is time blocking, but it's also it's a time blocking without the to-do list within the time block. As a homeschool mom, I remember I would time block a lot, but I always would have the, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're
Yeah.
going to do this. But
Yeah.
it's more like the time block of in the afternoons when I would be like, okay, for 3 hours, you guys can read, you can do whatever. And it was that freedom to move within the space.
That's right. Yeah. That's exactly my experience. For a long time, I felt like you really do remind me of me, by the way.
I love that. That's a compliment. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. But you do. There's a lot of things that you say that truly resonate with me. The Cabbage Patch Dolls, like for sure. But also that idea of I really want to accomplish something. I feel compelled to accomplish something, but it also needs to be meaningful. So I don't want to just spit stuff out for the sake of it.
Mhm.
And also sometimes there's a time pressure that actually helps to accelerate how much we're putting on paper or how much we're really doing. And yet, I don't know about you, but I want time constraints around things so that I'm not doing the same thing over and over. And yet, I want full freedom to do whatever I want, whenever I want to. And if I, I'm a little complicated around the time relationship, but like grade 8, I'm writing a novella and I wrote right through the night.
Mhm.
And I didn't wake up. I realized what time it was, that it was
Mhm.
about to, I have to get ready for school, but I had just fully went into flow. And
Mhm.
that's really how I engage my creativity. And yet,
Right.
I have to create time around or constraints around things.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned the pressure because I do think that there is something beautiful about understanding that a little bit of pressure actually for some of us helps refine what we need to do. Like for me, creativity within the confines of pressure actually unearths more creativity. If there's no pressure, sometimes I can get lost in it. So that little bit of pressure actually does help. I was just writing an article on Substack about that, where if I didn't have the pressure of the deadline with my book, the book would still be in my
Right.
head. So
Yeah.
yeah. And I have to tell you, my husband for Christmas gave me a Cabbage Patch doll,
Oh,
found a vintage one,
oh,
ordered it. Yes. Yes.
what's the,
It, you know the name? I didn't even take it out of the box because it's so old, but it's a one from the Olympics in 1991, I think.
oh,
So yeah, I didn't open it. I was like, I'm just gonna leave
that's
it.
so romantic.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I wonder if it was as hard to find as it was for my mom the year they came out.
I don't know. He said, he goes, I know it's kind of a different one. It's like a gymnast, but he goes, they're not easy to find new and in a box at this age, this time. So it was an unopened one. So I'm like, I don't know if I should open it.
So, for those that know me but don't know you, would you share the significance of the Cabbage Patch dolls for you?
I would. So in my book, I shared a story about when I was in third grade, I believe there was a birthday party that was a Cabbage Patch doll birthday party. And everyone was to bring their doll. And then we're going to share about, their name and the birth certificate and all of that. And I didn't have one. And honestly, I don't even know. My parents were here recently, and I don't even know why I didn't have one. I don't know if I didn't express a need or it wasn't in the budget, but for whatever reason, I didn't have one. And my mom put together this doll of hers and got it all ready. And I went to this party and I carried it, and she got a new dress for it. And at the party, there was a time when everyone was talking about the dolls, and they were sharing the information.
Yeah.
And it was the first time where there was this whisper in the room where I realized I don't fit in and I'm getting made fun of for something that I can't control.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't within my capacity at that point to control it. And I also remember that dichotomy of feeling kind of bad because it was my mom's
Mhm.
doll. And
Mhm.
so it was the first time I really became aware of what others could say and how it could influence how I felt about myself. And there's a picture that I actually have of all of us girls standing there with our dolls. And I can just see, I can look into my eyes, and I can, like, those little third grade eyes, and I can see that it's that one of those forced smiles. And for me, it was kind of the beginning of that spark part of like, I need to have X, Y, and Z to fit in, or otherwise, if I don't have this or I don't look this way, people will make fun of me. It was like almost like I became aware of the world. And for me, part of getting that spark back was actually recognizing that moment and the impact it had and that thread that went through my life.
So when did you see, or when did you notice that it began to unpack, or what was the impetus for it unpacking?
The
Your
the
experience?
doll story, yeah, the doll story was really probably over 20 years. Like the
Yeah.
idea that I remembered it is very significant to me. Like there's not that many stories from my childhood that I can remember, but for some reason I remembered that story. I can remember the whole, I just the feeling, and I can remember standing there, and I can remember wanting to be picked up, and that awareness. And I took a bunch of counseling classes when I probably about 25 years ago. And I remember sitting across as part of learning to become a counselor, you would get counseled. And that story came up. And I was like, what? And so I thought there's got to be some significance to it. So it's almost been this like gradual mulling over of it over all these years, and a gentleness to the me that existed in that time, and this love to her, because honestly we're all kind of these innocent kids a lot
Yeah.
of times, and we get pushed into these places and we instantly develop a persona, or we have to be a certain way, and it's really out of it's kind of protecting our own self.
Yes. In fact, it really reminds me of internal family systems. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if you're exposed to that concept. So really, it is about revisiting your younger parts and the things that were really influenced or affected when you're younger. And those little parts of us, or that 8-year-old that 14-year-old self or part continues to carry on no matter how old you are. So then I've noticed that when in coaching, I'm looking back at that moment when someone's challenged by something, then I always go to the what was your first experience around that? And they
Mm-hmm.
that moment, and then we begin to unpack that, and then they can be free from that mental space or that mindset now.
Yeah, it's a very powerful, powerful way. And it's a little bit, I've often said, you know, when I've talked with my kids or I've worked with other people, a lot of times we'll dismiss that first thing. We'll hear something and then we're like, oh, I do not want that to be. And so we look for something else to
Yes.
that's a little bit softer.
Yeah.
And you know, that first thought, that first word, that first impression is really, I say it's our soul and our heart, like, hey, here it is. Pay
Like it or
attention. And
not. Yes.
yeah, exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
And it's really powerful because it does sometimes the reigniting, or I keep saying reigniting, but like igniting your spark or getting your spark back
Mm-hmm.
is really about looking at the things that aren't working for you,
Mm-hmm.
shedding the stuff that isn't, so then you can just be present to what is right now.
Yeah, definitely. I liken it to, you know, and I think maybe you and I shared about this too, that song, "This Little Light of Mine," and it's blow it out or put it under a bushel basket, and that idea of the things that aren't working are really smothering the oxygen that we need, and looking at that, and the blowing it out is whether it's our own self or the world pushing it away from what we need, and so in order for fire to grow, you have to have, you know, the kindling underneath, which is the stuff that we love, but you also have to give it your space
Yeah.
to get that oxygen in. And that to me has been this removal of stuff.
Yeah. And that reminds me of our conversation. So, if I haven't said this already a couple times, Rachel and I had a conversation on my podcast, the Homeschool Mama Self Care podcast. And I that you were speaking to the challenge that moms have, and I think this is a mom's universal experience, not just homeschool, but we have a hard time actually putting time in for us at all. And sometimes when I'm with moms, they'll just be like, but there is no time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes from a perspective of I'm superhuman and I'm capable of doing anything at all times, at all costs, for anyone without acknowledging my needs. And it just isn't an option. You have to acknowledge your needs. You are a human too.
Absolutely. I'll go back to what I always say with that is we always find time if our kids have to go to the doctor, dentist, they have a sporting thing, whatever it is, there's always time. So the time is there. It's just the prioritization, the allocation of time. And we would feel probably guilty if we didn't do those things for them. And I always want moms to reframe it and look at for ourselves because we're teaching them about what it's like to be a parent and a mom, and they need to see us taking care of ourselves and thriving in that versus my mom was she was a great mom but she was always burned out, she was unhappy, she was all of that they're very aware. This is what I have learned in my 28 years 29 years of parenting is they know.
Yes, they know. They know things about you don't know.
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I remember us talking about vulnerability, and both of us expressed it in a similar way. That I heard you speak it, but I know myself, and I know my stories, and I have learned myself that until the point I am comfortable enough to be my true self in front of other people, to be vulnerable, not inappropriately vulnerable, but just
Mm-hmm.
honestly with other people at chosen points. That is when I'm able to build connections with people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not able to build connections with people if I'm masked and if I'm putting on a face, the one that I think they want. I'm not able to connect, even if they like the one, that mask that I've put in front of my face.
Mm-hmm. I that's the perfect way to describe it too. That vulnerability, it's an interesting concept too because it's you have to be vulnerable to be
Uh,
vulnerable. You have to be willing to step into this unknown space. And I really do think it goes down to back to fear. And I've heard many people talk about fear. I think Gabby Bernstein described it as false evidence appearing real.
yeah,
This idea that when the fear is there, I don't know if I can be vulnerable. And then stepping back with that fear, there's something else that's telling us you need to stop, whether it's that Cabbage Patch story of mine, when you're in a situation, people make fun of you or whatever it
Yeah.
is, and then embracing it. The other thing that's interesting to me is in my house, I've been pondering this too, is I've had these two signs probably about 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And my son Eli was like, "Hey, Mom, do you know that you have one sign that says do one thing every day that scares you," which is attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt. And he goes, "And in the other room, you have one that says do one thing every day that makes you happy."
Mm,
And I was like, "Oh, Eli, good catch, good catch." And then I started pondering it and I thought, how often on the other side of fear is the very thing that makes us happy?
mm,
And sometimes we allow fear, I don't know what's going to happen, I don't know what's going to do, to stop us from actually reaching that happy spot.
mm. That's beautiful. Which kind of, I guess I think two things when you say that is one, what are we in the way of presently? What are we doing
Mm-hmm.
for us? But then the other thing is, hey, even if you have, some of us have 10-year plans and we have these
Mm-hmm.
big, hairy, audacious goals, but we don't know what life is calling us to next, like what the next thing is. So be open to the unexpected and maybe don't look at it as fear of the unknown, but just like Gabby Bernstein said, you said fearlessly embrace. No.
It's false evidence appearing real.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's that idea that what am I basing this fear on? Is it something that's not even true?
Right.
Is it this idea like, some people are like, well, I could never be a speaker because I do a lot of public speaking or I've done lots of media interviews and I hear that often. I could never do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you start to unpack it, a lot of times it's, when I was in seventh grade, I spoke in front of the class and I lost my words and everyone made fun of me.
Yeah.
And it's something that's so old
Yeah.
and so there, they carry it with, oh no, I can't do that. I can't do that. And then like for me, it lights me up to get to speak. I love that moment so much, but there was a moment where I remember like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. And I'm so grateful that the fear, instead of it being a stop sign for me, it was really like, okay, it was anticipation. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes we mix them up. We think, oh, because it kind of feels the same. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah. That is really beautiful. I have that story too. Kindergarten. Feel
Yeah.
no way am I going on that stage. Started doing speaking or presenting or all the things, even for myself, I'd keep going, I don't do this. I'm 5 years old and I will not go up on that stage. But it turns out I'm not 5 anymore. I'm sure that's not surprising. You said we were talking about living a life well lived. Do you remember having a conversation around that? I'm sure you've had so many conversations. So, but living a life well lived, what does that mean to you, and how are you pursuing that?
Uh, to me, it's you're kind of all in. It's the grace to have a good day, it's a bad day, but it's not living, I'm going to wait till tomorrow, or I'm it's kind of taking the marrow out of life, figuring it out. And I've told this to my kids, like I have those 10-year plans, those audacious goals, but I also know that within the context of it
Yeah.
is this very fluid and dynamic life. And I don't want to I don't want to waste it because I don't know what it's going to look like to get to that 10-year goal, but I do know what it looks like to live today well. What can I do today that moves me one step forward, but also embraces and is grateful for this moment in life? And I'm less than a month away from my 50th birthday. And I've thought about it a lot. And I've thought about, okay, what are the lessons? And for me, it's definitely the gratitude for that another loop around the sun, gratitude and gratefulness for the people that are in my life, and this letting go of, I'm going to do that in 10 years. I'm going to do that in 20 years. Like, I want to do
Yeah.
it now. I want to experience, I want to give back, I want to serve, and I want to enjoy this time on earth.
Yeah. I just got, first of all, I'm 51, so I had that experience.
Mm-hmm.
In that first year, after 50, I spent the entire year doing that exact kind of journaling exercises all year long, and used it as jumping off board for my memoir.
Mm,
And so that's
mm,
also healing to go backwards like that.
mhm.
But what I'm also seeing is just this week that I have an opportunity to do one of those 10-year big, hairy, audacious goals right
Yeah.
now. And I didn't
Yeah.
imagine. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I'm so excited.
Hey.
And yet when I look at it, I go, whoa, that's 10 years earlier than I thought. Is
Mhm.
that, and just like you, I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm doing it now. Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, it's just this, there's this energy about it. Like, my husband, one of the greatest things he's ever taught me was the simple question, what will you regret? What will you regret more? Taught it to my kids, taught it to all these people. And that one question has honestly changed my perspective. Will I regret not trying more than I will trying? And it kind of removes that. It takes you, it almost is like a fast forward button back to our days of VHS tapes, or skip for everyone streaming. And it brings to the end for a second, and you have that moment of looking back. Oh, what will I regret more? And then you are back to the present. And it's, to me, it's an honoring of the future self.
Yeah. That's exactly right. I think of that. Like, what about my 60-year-old self? If she,
Mm-hmm.
and then I look back and I say, did I do all the things that I wanted to do? And I've heard that, I forget the book, but there was a research study done about people on their deathbeds and what their
Mm-hmm.
most regret. And it was that they didn't fully live the way they thought they should on their own terms. And
Yeah, I think we wait. We wait.
mhm,
We just wait. I really believe it's at some level, and the older we get, we realize it's, we live under the illusion that we have an infinite number of time, that we're invincible in a way. There was a boy, a young man from Minnesota that ended up dying from, his name was Zach Sobiak. There's a beautiful documentary about him, but he ended up dying from bone cancer when he was 18. And one of the things that he had said in his documentary was that he always says to his friends, I'll see you tomorrow. And the assumption, the presupposition is we always have tomorrow. And it just, I remember hearing that and reading that, and it just struck me to my core is we always do. And we have to live within the tension of, I'll see you tomorrow, but also appreciating today. And I was just driving my son, Caleb, back to college yesterday. And as we were driving, he was talking about how he says goodbyes. And he says, I don't want to live always so sad with the goodbyes. So I always say, I start planning the next time. And so it helps me to enjoy the moment now. And I was like, it's pretty wise for 19.
I'd say that's what I would say. Yeah, but
Yeah.
both got 19-year-olds. And I didn't know that
Yeah.
your 19-year-old Caleb is my 19-year-old Rachel.
Oh,
And he would have been a Caleb.
interesting. Yeah, I love that name. And, I'm partial to Rachel too.
Yeah, kind of the lamb. Not coincidentally, we were talking about fear and bravery, and you actually shared a quote about, um, and it really speaks to what you were just speaking to. And I don't remember the exact words, but your intention is to live a brave life. And I
Mhm.
think oftentimes we are listening to other people and asking them, "What do you think
Mhm.
about my big, hairy, audacious life, or me living my life without the masks, or like we spoke about, not shedding the Matryoshka doll
Mhm.
coverings and really allowing ourselves to be the fullest us." And I think we're often listening to what other people think about who we are, and that keeps us limited.
Mhm. Yeah, I tend to think that's the human experience for a great portion of us, is that we tend to bounce ideas off somebody else. We hear their impression about it, and we override our own soul, our own heart. We think, oh, they might know us better. And I know for myself, I'm one of those people that's very easy. I pick up on the whatever the signature is in the room, or the feeling. I can just pick up on it.
Yeah.
But I've learned I've taken this beautiful meditation class, and I've learned in that class where we would have these moments, and then everybody afterwards would share their perspective. And nobody gives advice. When you're done sharing, everyone says, thank you for sharing. And then you move on.
Yeah.
And then you move on. Well,
Yeah.
what it taught me was to learn to listen to myself for the first time, because I've done all these women's groups and these groups where we share. And then when it's done, everybody gives their advice, which is beautiful. It's beautiful that we're all wanting to help. but so often, for at least my personality, it would override what
Yeah.
I was feeling. And I would lean into that versus leaning into my own. And for me, the process of the last 3 years doing this type of practice has been to finally clear all that chatter, to actually hear, okay, who are you really underneath all of that?
That's beautiful. That really is beautiful. I hear that's partly a perimenopause thing, or this lives. There's a really beautiful book by Christiane Northrup, The Wisdom of Menopause, and I was so delighted to hear those a passage about how we transition into the I don't really care what everybody thinks. Thank you. I'm going to live my life, and that happens at that phase. So there's got to be some redeeming benefit to this whole thing.
There has to be. Maybe it's the hormones. Who knows? We just have a surge of one, and we're like, you know what? I don't really care.
So led by perimenopausal or menopausal women, I believe that truly.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So beautiful. Some of your old stories that you shared in your book. And, I had this conversation with you, and I know you've had this conversation many times about finances,
Mm-hmm.
and especially how I've noticed this myself, that when women render the finances to their partner, that they are actually not fully embracing who they are or their potential to really influence or choose their life choices. And I find that an interesting connection that I see on repeat. Certainly was my experience too. Didn't even think about that stuff because my husband was so dang good at it. But I've noticed that. And so your story, you really shared, not the same story of what I just said, but you really shared that you learned how to come out of what felt like an overwhelm in that area of your life. And that's what propelled you into the public sphere.
It did. So, if you don't know me, this is my second marriage. I was married for almost 18 years and was it was just an unhealthy marriage. And one of the things that was in there was really, really severe financial problems. And I truly believe that one of the ways that, especially for women, that we stay stuck in financial issues is that we have a definite cloak of shame over finances. It's one of those things we don't talk about. And I know from my own self, from that experience of living under that cloak of shame, the shame spoke things like, if you were smart enough, this wouldn't happen. If you were loved enough, this wouldn't happen. If you were good enough, like all of these enough statements. And to actually remove the cloak meant that I would feel not smart, like I wasn't good enough, all these things. So I just hid. And in the hiding, accepted a role
Yeah.
that was much too small and too limiting. And the role kept me stuck. My role within the context of it, well, it could seem good if I was a good enough wife, a good enough mom, a good enough homemaker, then this part would get fixed. So in some ways, I pushed it over there thinking this isn't my spot.
Yeah.
I'm not, this isn't my space. And I had a really good friend, and I'm so grateful for those truth teller people that are like, Rachel, if you don't take care of it, you are going along, you're agreeing with something that's not good for your children. You have got to take care of it. Rise. And it was like she called me out.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I don't want this to be my children's story. I don't want them to live under this cloak of shame and this inability to move and this fear. And this was not even false evidence. This was legitimate fear. When you don't have money, you're constantly worried about money. It's suffocating. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was one of the reasons I thought, I don't know how I'm going to do this. All I know is I'm going to do one thing every day to claw myself out. And when you're in a financial situation where you have to get out, it's not instant. And that's the hardest part, is it's this definite journey of getting yourself out one thing after another, one thing after another, and being grateful for that. And you and I shared, but I always think it's so interesting that one of the places that was redeeming for me in my life was, for all those years that I was kind of hiding under it, I thought I can never talk about money. I can never do that. It's so embarrassing, so embarrassing. And then fast forward to 10 years later, 8 years later, and I was on the Today Show talking about money, which opened all these other doors. And I just think, okay, there's truth to this, because we have to talk about money. We have got to, one thing, teach about money. Like growing up in the 80s, you just didn't talk about money. We don't talk about money. I'm like, we got to talk about money. And so I've made it my mission to talk freely about money, talk freely about my journey, and to do it with the hopes that somebody that feels the weight of that shame can realize that there doesn't need to be shame. Shame is the tool that keeps you stuck in that
Yeah,
spot.
that's so true. And actually what you did was be vulnerable,
Yeah.
and like really vulnerable, and but invited other people to also come along in that journey. And whenever we do in any way show that vulnerability, we're inviting other people on that journey. And even though it's scary for everybody when they first take the steps of acknowledging what's true, what's really going on in their lives. But as soon as they do that, it's open, it's broken. Now we can move on and actually start learning what's the next step for my, intentional, purposeful life.
Yeah, I've told people often, it was like I was balancing all these plates, trying to keep the masks going. And then when I made the very bold, audacious steps that I needed to do in my life, there was a moment when everything crashed. And it was like everybody could see me. I was just, I was the wizard with the curtain pulled open at that moment. But the beauty was I could decide what I wanted to pick up again. And I
Yeah.
had never been able to do that before in my life. I was like, I don't need that one anymore. I'm going to pick up this one. Or I had and it was almost like that perimenopause thing where I was like, well, everybody can see me now and I don't really care. And I got to do what I got to do.
Yeah. I'm so glad. Of all the things that we've spoken to today, are there certain things, or maybe certain things I haven't spoken to, that you feel like, you know what, this, or these are the areas where I see people are most challenged, that they feel most burned out, or they mostly feel like, oh, I'm kind of done with all of this? Are there certain things?
I honestly feel like it's almost the abundance of information for people that makes us get to that spot of feeling like, because you can go onto Instagram, you can go onto Facebook, you can go anywhere and you can see, oh, I should do this course, or I should do this, or I should do this, or I should do this, or I'm going to take that survey about myself. And again, it's like going back to that meditation group. It's all beautiful. Everybody that's a creator is offering something that's of value to the world, but we can't do it all. We can't, if we're always doing that consuming of it, we're not actually doing the work of planting it. And I really believe that's where that burnout comes in,
Mm,
is there's this beauty in the tending of a garden. At some point, you have to decide, what seed am I actually going to
yeah.
plant? And you can't keep planting 8 varieties of peas. You're going to plant one, 10 to one, let it grow. It might not be what you expected, but you're still tending to it. And I really believe there's something beautiful about the art of tending to your own soul, and the art of saying, this is who I am. I don't need all that. I love that you get to do that, but I want to really figure out what lights
I
me up.
love that. Because do you do coaching as well, or are you focusing primarily on writing?
I have. I've done coaching for entrepreneurs. I really enjoyed it. I love it. I also know that it's one of those spaces, because I'm kind of an empath, that
Yeah.
I have to be careful with it, because I'll take too much on, and then all of a sudden I'm bogged down. So it's generally one of those places where I don't highlight it that often, but I've definitely done it before when it's in alignment with who I am.
When you share what you just shared, I ask that because that is something that I've learned. People, especially if you're doing what we do, being in front of people
Mm-hmm.
in a variety of ways online, they build a trust with you. If they
Mm-hmm.
feel and you're their vibe, they build a trust with you. And oftentimes people will come and say, okay, here's my scenario, tell me what to do. And I do the exact thing that you just said. I say, my goal is to help you shed the stuff that's not working and help you get clear on what's true for you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not, I have had teenagers, and I know that if you say you should do X, they'll go,
So true. So
you know,
true. That.
it's so true. Probably not. But
Mm-hmm.
also, we just as humans, we don't actually want to be told what to do. If we are
Right.
asked to tell me what to do, sometimes it's because we're accustomed to listening to what other people think, and we're
Mm-hmm.
not listening to this. And I want to direct people to this too. So how you just spoke, that is exactly how I coach.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. I think it's that gift of wonder. You and I chatted about that too, is we are just, we live again in that linear world of do X, do one, do two, you're going to get to this spot. You'll get a grade, you'll get this, you'll get the job. And creativity from a very young age is often graded. And I've been perplexed. The older I get, the more I'm like, how in the world does art get a grade? Just get a grade? Because maybe like, I remember being the child that had to color in the lines so tightly, and I'd get so frustrated if I didn't. And like even the concept of double shading, it had to be exactly right. And now I realize that it was because there was a grade attached to it. And I have just truly embraced the idea of wonder and the idea of just shifting perspective. So one of the things I do that I've worked with my community for a long time is I'm one of those word of the year people.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's changed my life.
Yeah.
And I've done it for about 15 years. And this year my word is kaleidoscope.
Oh,
And I was like, this is an interesting word. Like, and I kept trying to change it. And I'm like, no, you know what it is. But I love it because it's always the same pieces, but you just shift it a little bit and you get to see something different and you just shift it. And to me, it's that kind of softening of getting older, or that, oh, wait, let me just back up. Let me just hear it from your perspective, subtle shift. Still the same me, but seeing it another way.
beautiful. And I use that all the time in coaching. I
Really?
have it.
That's so cool.
I've got one right beside my computer in my room, and I show them that because we will not be able to orchestrate or change the details in our lives, or at least we can sometimes pick and choose the people that are coming along for the ride, but we can't choose our backstories, and we can't choose where we were born, and all the different dynamics of our life. But we can most definitely shift perspective and see things very differently, and how we shift our perspective directly influences what happens next.
We
That's
are kindred.
yeah, are.
Amazing.
I haven't even asked you about Enneagram, but I'm pretty sure we're similar there too.
Oh, that's
Myers,
amazing.
INFJ, Enneagram 2 wing 3. Am I wrong?
Do you know that I don't know my Enneagram? I'm one of those people. People always ask me, I'm like, I don't know. But I do know I am the I on that. For years, people thought I was an extrovert. And, no, my husband will tell you she is not. I love being in public situations. I love it, love it, love it. And then there comes a moment where, boom, like I hit the wall and I have that blank stare. And then my husband's like, it's probably time to go. And he is an extreme extrovert. Like he thrives with people. So we have this, give and take.
Like your Cabbage Patch doll is in the car. You need to
Yeah.
nurture her.
Yes,
Oh,
exactly.
so lovely to chat with you. I know I could keep
Me
chatting with you, and
too.
yeah, well, we should continue the conversation, even if
I would
it's
love it.
anywhere else in any other way, because I truly feel like a kindred spirit here. And I am so grateful that you've had the stories that you've had, and that you have transformed them and you did something with them. We talked about, that compost heap of crappy stories that get dished out to us, and we get to decide, are we going to use that as nurturing for our garden, for those seeds that you said you were planting, or do we bog down by a giant heap of garbage on top of us? And it sounds like you've used that, and you're continuing to use that, and platforming so that we can support and encourage other women to live their lives intentionally. And I love that. I'm so glad you've got that platform.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I don't even want to stop talking, but I know that we. And if you want to listen to the recording, it's available on YouTube by the end of tomorrow. So it's a Homeschool Mom and Wellness Mindset YouTube channel. But it was such a pleasure chatting with you and getting to know you.
You too.
And
I would love to chat again.
yeah,
So we put it on the books. We can do it another time. It would be awesome.
Yeah, I'm introverting here on the west coast of Canada.
I'm here in Nashville, Tennessee.
And we find the book in all the places.
Correct.
Get back to the park. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Love it. It's so fun to chat with you. We'll talk to you
You too.
soon.
Thank
Okay.
you so much. I appreciate you. Bye-bye.